Flames, Sudan, the Land That Burns, Part 1. The desert wind of Darfur always carried stories. Stories of caravans crossing ancient sand, stories of kingdoms long buried beneath dust, stories of families who believed the land itself listened when they prayed. But now the wind carried something else: smoke. Not the smoke of cooking fires or harvest celebrations, but the thick, black breath of destruction, the kind of smoke that clings to the sky like a scar. This is Darfur, a land of sun-scorched plains, thorny acacia trees, and villages of mud-brick homes, now marked by ash. And this is the story of how it burned. The boy who could hear the desert. In the small village of Myrna, a skinny 12-year-old boy named Yahya always claimed he could hear the desert speaking. His mother, Amina, would laugh softly and touch his cheek. "The desert speaks to all of us," she'd say. "We just forget how to listen." Yahya would lie on his back at night, staring at the stars, the same stars his ancestors once used to guide them through trade routes and migrations. He'd listen to the wind whistle through the dry grass, to the soft murmur of distant camels, to the faint echo of music at a wedding in a neighboring village. To Yahya, Darfur had always been alive, a place of rhythm, song, and ancient memory. But one night, as he pressed his ear to the sand, he heard something different. Something heavy, something echoing, something wrong. His heart tightened. The desert wasn't singing. It was warning. The first shadows. The next morning, the women of the village awoke with the sun, sweeping their courtyards, grinding millet, preparing tea as they always did. Men gathered under the large acacia tree, discussing the coming harvest. Children chased chickens, laughing. Nothing looked dangerous, nothing sounded dangerous. But above them, vultures circled. And on the horizon, tiny black dots moved, slow yet certain. Men on horseback, men in pickups, men whose arrival would rewrite Yahya's world. They called themselves Janjaweed, riders of the devil. The government called them militias. Survivors called them death. They were the first flame. The day the sky burned. Yahya's mother smelled smoke before anyone else. Not smoke from their own cooking fires. This was different. Chemical. Acrid. Sharp enough to make her throat sting. She rushed outside and froze. Black clouds were rising behind the distant hills. Birds flew in panicked swarms. Dogs barked uncontrollably. Then the sound came. A deep, thunderous rumble. Engines. Gunshots, screams carried by the wind. Before Yahya could ask what was happening, the alarm bell rang. A rusted metal wheel struck with a hammer. "Run to the wadi! Run!" But it was too late. The Janjaweed were already pouring over the hill. Dust spiraled around their horses. Scarves covered their faces except for black, hungry eyes. Machine guns gleamed under the rising sun. The earth trembled beneath the roar of pickup trucks mounted with heavy weapons, weapons villagers had only heard of in rumors. And then, everything shattered. Gunfire tore through the air like ripping cloth. Horses screamed. People ran in every direction, clutching their children, dropping what they held. Yahya felt his mother grab his wrist, pulling him toward the riverbed. But a bomb exploded near the granary, throwing them into the dirt. His ears rang, his vision blurred. The world had become fire. The running and the falling. Amina tried to stand, coughing from the dust. "Yahya, we must go! Get up!" The boy's legs trembled, but he arose. They ran through smoke so thick that it painted the air black. Flames devoured the straw roofs of homes. Goats bleated as they burned. People stumbled, screamed, collapsed. Yahya saw his cousin Farid lying face down, unmoving. He tried to stop, but his mother pulled him harder. "Don't look! Keep running!" But the Janjaweed had circled around. A horseman blocked their path, leveling his gun at them. Amina threw herself in front of Yahya. "Please, he is a child." The horseman didn't respond. His finger tightened on the trigger. A shot fired, but not at them. Somewhere behind, a villager had thrown a spear, hitting the horseman's shoulder. The gunman turned, firing wildly. "Run!" Amina screamed. They sprinted toward the dried riverbed, the burnt soil scorching Yahya's bare feet. His lungs burned, his eyes stung, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Because behind them, the village of Myrna, the only world he had ever known, was collapsing into flames. The Wadi of Ghosts. The riverbed was already packed with villagers, mothers clutching babies, old men leaning on sticks, children screaming for parents who would never answer. The Janjaweed didn't chase them here, not yet. They stayed in the village, looting, burning, shouting praises to themselves. From the ridge, Yahya watched Myrna die. Smoke twisted into the morning sky. Flames reached for the clouds as if trying to escape the earth. He saw the acacia tree where his father once told stories collapse in fire. He saw their home vanish in a burst of sparks. He saw the school explode into dust. And in that moment, he heard the desert again. This time, it wasn't warning. It was crying. The silence that follows hell. Hours later, when the attackers disappeared, a few men crept back toward the ruins. No one spoke. Words felt too small. The smell of burning flesh hung in the air. Bodies lay in positions of terror, hands up, arms around children, faces in the dust. Yahya pressed himself against his mother's side, trembling. She didn't shed a tear. Not because she didn't want to, because she didn't have any left. The land had stolen everything from them. Everything except survival. The journey toward nowhere. That night the elders gathered. Their faces looked like carved stone, their voices heavy. "The Janjaweed will return," one said. "We must go west, toward Chad. There is a camp there." A camp. A place for people who have no place. Amina held Yahya close as they began walking into the desert, carrying only what hadn't been burned. The moonlight cast long shadows of tired feet. Babies cried softly. A donkey limped. Someone whispered prayers over and over. Hours became days. Days became weeks. They walked through dunes where the dead were buried in sand, through plains where scavengers stared with yellow eyes, through nights so cold Yahya's cheeks chattered. They survived by sharing crumbs, drops of water, the last strength of their hope. But the desert did not spare everyone. An old woman collapsed one morning, too weak to continue. Her son begged to carry her, but she pushed him away. "Save the boy," she whispered. Yahya never forgot the sound of her breath fading into the sand. The camp of the unseen. After nearly 2 weeks, they saw it. A sea of white tents, thousands of people moving like ghosts, thin children with swollen bellies, women with hollow eyes, men staring into nothingness. Amina squeezed Yahya's hand. "We're safe now," she whispered. But Yahya wasn't sure. The camp wasn't a place of safety. It was a place for the forgotten. Aid workers moved quickly, handing out sacks of grain, water jugs, blankets. They looked tired too, tired from witnessing so much misery. At night the camp echoed with coughs, with quiet sobs, with the coughing of generators and the buzzing of flies. Yahya overheard conversations. Another village burned. They took the women. The government doesn't care. The world isn't watching. He realized something terrible. Myrna wasn't the only village destroyed. It was just one of thousands. The seeds of new fire. One evening, as Yahya sat outside their tent, a group of men gathered around a truck radio. Static, voices fading in and out. Then a reporter's voice emerged. Fighting has intensified between Sudanese government forces and rebel groups. Militias accused of ethnic cleansing continue attacks across Darfur. Ethnic cleansing. Yahya didn't know the term, but he understood the meaning. Someone wanted them erased. He felt the fire inside him burn. The same fire that destroyed his home, now glowing inside his chest. Was this revenge? Anger? Fear? He didn't know. But he did know one thing. The desert wouldn't stop burning. The camp wasn't far enough. One dawn, distant gunfire snapped the sky open. People shouted, stampeding through narrow paths between tents. Aid workers yelled into radios, "The Janjaweed are coming! Evacuate! Move!" Yahya's heart dropped. Not again. Not here. Amina grabbed his arm, her voice shaking for the first time. "We must run, Yahya!" The camp erupted into chaos. Tents collapsed as families fled, children screamed. Smoke blossomed on the horizon like a black flower of death. A convoy of pickup trucks appeared, armed men firing into the air. Bullets punched holes into canvas walls. Tents burst into flames. Someone shouted behind them, "Don't run! They'll shoot! Drop to the ground!" But Amina didn't listen. She pulled Yahya toward the thorn bushes at the edge of the camp. Then, not 20 meters away, another explosion thundered. Yahya felt his mother's grip loosen. He turned. Amina was on the ground, blood staining the sand. Her eyes wide, fixed on the sky. "Mother, Mother, we have to go, Mother!" But she didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. The wind pushed dust across her face as if the desert itself were trying to cover her gently. Yahya fell to his knees. The world became silent. Voices, gunfire, screams, all distant, muffled, meaningless. The last person who knew the sound of his heartbeat was gone. Someone lifted him, an aid worker shouting his name. "Yahya, we must move, move!" But Yahya didn't feel his legs, didn't feel his hands, didn't feel anything. He had become empty, a hollow shell carried through smoke and fear. Behind him, the camp, the place of last hope, was burning. Just like Morna. Just like everything else. The horsemen rode through the ruins, shouting victory cries, firing into fleeing crowds. Yahya didn't look back. Not because he didn't care. Because looking back hurt more than dying. By noon, the survivors reached the border. Chadian soldiers opened the gates, ushering people through. For the first time, Yahya realized he had crossed into a new country, a new land of hot sand and dusty wind. But this land felt no safer. As he stared through the fence, he understood a truth too heavy for a child. Home wasn't a place anymore. Home was memory, and memory burns too. Deserts remember everything: the footsteps of caravans, the laughter of children, the blood spilled in forgotten wars. Darfur remembers. It remembers the day men on horseback descended like a plague. It remembers the villages turned to ash. It remembers Yahya's scream when he found his mother in the dust. This was not an accident, not a random act of violence. It was the beginning of one of the darkest chapters of the 21st century, a human-made hell that would leave millions displaced, thousands slaughtered, and an entire generation scarred. But this was only the first wave. The fire was far from over.